Is it really you, Chris Clough?
Yeah, it is me. It is me. It is
Okay,
me
so
for the.
you're on the other side.
Yeah, I'm on the other side. It's I want to leap off from the last thing that we just had before the on-ramp, which is the Hangouts going away. And as of August 1st, you mentioned. So you're getting that prompt on your side because you're setting up the feed, right? Most
Yeah,
likely.
so when I hit broadcast, this little box comes up and says Hangouts. It said some things and then it's got bolded August 1st.
All
So I
right.
read that it's going away August 1st. So we're gonna have to investigate.
Pivot. Is when I was throwing down on the whole leaving on the last couple of days of school and kind of having the spaces that I wanted to maximize connections and touch base with some people, because there's that sense as you're leaving school in the last couple of days, beyond the cleanup, the pack up, the planning forward, maybe if you're kind of doing that for September. Funny enough, when I mentioned that to a few people, there were quite a few people that were like, no, I'm not planning ahead. I'm not. It was just noticeable, not surprising, not a bad thing, not a good thing. Just I had more people than not saying I am not looking to start planning before I wrap up the end of this semester. But thinking about leaving the school and having, different colored Post-it note highlighted multi-algorithmic, I got to get this before I go, if then kind of decision making. As we left, I felt like I didn't satisfy the social connections that I wanted to. I didn't get FaceTime with people that I thought to myself, I'm going to have a little more difficulty finding them over the summer. And I want to. With that in mind, and now we have August 1st as our, I guess, last possible broadcast from the Google structure known as Hangouts. Does that do anything to your mind? Are you thinking like, because I think there's some clear, it strikes me that like we're being leveraged towards, is it YouTube live events? Like it has to be a YouTube live event. They're just going to I guess they're going to have to pull the Hangout element off of it, right?
I have no idea what they're gonna do.
Huh.
It's funny because as I listen to you talk about it, I'm not feeling anything. I'm just like, I guess we're just gonna have to find a new way, like, or just see what are they doing now that will still allow us to do this. I just feel right now, man, I just can't be bothered. Like, excuse me, as you talk about leaving school, feeling unsatisfied with your social connections, I'm 180 degrees opposite of you.
See ya.
I'm leaving thinking, thank God I don't have to make any social connections.
Yeah.
And I left feeling like just excited to not have to come in and talk to some of these people. And it's not coming from a place of I just think that I needed to move away from that social aspect of work. I don't want any of that. And I feel every day when you go into work, like this is what it must feel for people to have real jobs. They go into work every day and they have to talk to people that they might not be comfortable with or just don't want to. Like near the end, I just wanted to go in, do what I was supposed to do, which sometimes involves communicating with others, and then go home. That's all I wanted to do. As the buses are leaving and the staff's outside waving to the kids, I'm like, can the last bus just go so that I can go? And it's not about like, it wasn't towards the kids. Like I'm waving at the kids and I'm like, this was a good year. I'm going to miss my bunch. I hope they have a wicked summer. And I'm just looking around, there's all these staff members around me and I'm like, can I just go home? So it's interesting. You're leaving thinking, darn, I've got this unsatisfied feeling. I didn't make these connections with these people. And I'm like, I remember it was pouring rain. I'm like, and people are like, "You going to your car? It's raining." I'm like, "I'm going to my car. It's raining." And I got in the car and I was soaked. And I just started the car and drove away, thinking, I'm done, baby. I'm done. I need to go home and figure myself out. So when I come back, I feel energized and ready. But no, you're over here with your social stuff, and I'm over here, and I'm just like, no more. No more. I was looking at people and thinking, don't talk to me because I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to be here talking to you.
Dude, no, that's I get that too. I've had that in the past as well. I mean, I've been in that space in my head. For me, it was just more. It was like noticing my thinking, and noticing my thinking, and also realizing that my thinking has changed. As in, it was very different. It has been different in the past, and really not being able to. It could be that I'm just not being honest with myself. Like maybe I do know why my thinking's changing, and I'm just not willing to kind of throw down on what it is has shifted me. But there's other elements that were a little bit surprising to me, because I'm not the most nostalgic, nor sort of like socially connected in real life person. I'm not. I have very small circles that I flow through. And something this year, just I started noticing some of the power of those connections, and it stuck. And in the past, I could have just said, get your job done. You have a very specific task you need to do. Like I could have sort of made the work kind of fill up my perspective. And it's just this year, some of this other stuff, the social nature of work, started to make comments on my work life that I couldn't ignore. And part of it is maybe something in my brain. I mentioned on the on-ramp, maybe it could be age and stage of life. So it could be mastery of content area, like finally getting comfortable. So I have extra processing space to think about things apart from working with the kids, working with the resources, and working with colleagues. I don't know. I don't have a good way. And part of what comes out of this is I'm refusing, like there's no blog post coming out of this. there's no sort of pithy short list to building better relationships before you leave school, right? And I'm not even going to write any poetry about it. So any of those spaces that would have made this more euphemistic, other than I know there's 3 people I want to contact. 5 if I put all in, but 3 definitely I want to contact, that I'm going to try and create more in the relationship than what I left with. That's it. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. And that, I don't know what I'll learn from that. I don't have a plan. Like I'm building a deeper social network. I think it's each of the 3 that I want to build something more. There's a specific thing, a starting point that I feel like there's still space to kind of explore different kind of areas of interest that I connected with these people. So that'll be the next step. And if I accept that, if that person's like, yo, no, we'll see you in September, or there's, they don't respond to my digital reach outs, that's cool too. That's cool too. I mean, I'm not going to take that to mean anything other than what they're willing to tell me, as in, nope, Clough, I'm good. I don't need to get to know you any more than we already know you. So I beyond the digital, okay, so beyond I guess I am being nostalgic to a degree, beyond that sort of that social fabric that I'm taking a peek at in the on-ramp, when I was mentioning that idea of being able to reconstruct relationships within social feeds like Twitter. And I mentioned it'd be kind of cool to be able to annotate, like to make notes about a person within Twitter that you could capture in there, or to have some sort of a visualizer that would show your interactions with different hashtags and maybe different individuals over time. What do you think of that? What's your, just as a tool, if not a tool that you would necessarily say that you're going to use right now, what are your thoughts on that?
I like it. I like it, and I could see, as you were talking about it before and now, it'd be so cool if excuse me again. It'd be so cool if in Twitter, when you go to follow someone, as soon as you click follow, a box opens up and says, "Why are you following this person?" And you type in, like 3 or 4 sentences. Maybe it's 140 characters, and you just say, "Because of this, this, and this," and then somewhere, somewhere in your app, you can, not even in your apps, when you go back to that person's profile page, there's like a little asterisk beside their name. You click on it, and that little box opens and tells you what you had written the day. So it would say June 10th, 2019, you started following so and so, and this is why you said why you're following them. And then what would be even cooler is if you block them, mute them, or unfollow them, that asterisk would remain beside their name. So as you run into them on Twitter, you can click the asterisk and it could tell you why you unfollowed them, or why you muted them at the time, or why you blocked them. So it'd be really cool for Twitter to allow that extra little bit of information that only would be available to you. So if so it's not like other people can come and see, oh, Roland followed Chris because of this. No, it would be for me. So it'd be cool if it was housed in like in your followers list. So when you go to your followers, there's a little asterisk beside everybody's name. You just hover your mouse over it, and then it opens up a little box and it tells you, it reminds you, it's there. That data is there to tell you why you started following, what you said about that person when you started following them, and what you may have said about that person when you stopped following them. Because there are people I don't follow that I still see in my timeline, because people I do follow retweet their stuff or like their stuff, and then the algorithm sends it my way. And right now, as we were talking on the on ramp, right now, some of my unfollows and my blocks, and my mutes are fresh. And we talked a little bit about this. It was Isti. Isti was killing me. Even the not at Isti hashtag was killing me. It was just too much. I felt like, I guess, where I am in my life right now, what's going on in my life, it was just too much. And I actually thought, okay, what do I do here? Do I just mute all these people? Are there some that I should just not be following anymore because whatever it is I followed them for is not happening anymore? Like, it was a moment of it was just a moment of awareness. It was interesting, and I did mute some people because their tweets just, it was like more work to read their stuff than it would. The amount of work I was putting in to look at their stuff was not giving me the satisfaction that I normally get. So the payoff was nothing. So I was putting in all this work and getting nothing back. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. This is supposed to give me more than I put in, or at the very least equal out.
I like that.
And that's just my perspective on it.
No, I like that. And it's almost a, so it's a
Like,
funny,
I feel like I've curated my Twitter feed to give me what I want. And then all of a sudden I was getting all kinds of stuff that I was like, I don't want any of this. So why is it popping up? But that goes to people changing. Like, I remember back in my 20s and 30s, 20s and late 30s, late 20s, early 30s. I would meet someone, get to know them, really like their way, and then years later I would see a different person. That used to annoy me until I entered my mid to late 30s and realized, no, that's how life works. People are supposed to change. I used to be upset when I would run into somebody and realize they were a different person than when I first met them.
mm-hmm.
That would upset me. I feel like they did something dishonest or not authentic. But now that where I am today, I see that as, oh, all they did was grow and develop. Like, they met new people, they experienced new things. It changes them. Things change people. like you and I have talked, you know me a little bit deeper, well, a lot deeper than a lot of people know me because you're my friend, but
Hmm.
there are things that have happened in my life over the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years that have completely changed the way I operate, the way I see life, what's important to me, what's not important to me, you know? So I'm sure I still have people connected to me from years ago who would see me today and be like, what happened to you? You're different. And I guess not in a good way to them.
Hmm.
But for me, I would just say, oh, I've just experienced some stuff and grown and developed, and here I am. But
I
I'm
like,
okay with them saying to me, I'm letting go.
right.
Thanks, but no thanks. I'm okay with that. Okay, see ya. Take care. I'll see you around.
I like the that's kind of that's provocative to me, the thought of I should be receiving more than I'm getting. Like I should be unequivocally benefiting from the use of Twitter. Not that you use that word, but that's where my brain sort of kind of put it there, like, or a social, any sort of social, let's say digital interactions. Like at the heart of it, I should be able to benefit. Maybe it's not, I should be able to benefit regardless of my feed. Is it regardless of your actual input into it? Do you have that sense? Like you should benefit regardless of what you're actually putting into the system?
Well, that's a good question.
And
I would
go
say
ahead. Yeah, you go.
I I would say that I'm trying to set it up so that I'm connected with people that bring me value, and maybe, and if they connect with me, hope, I don't know what they think, but hopefully in some of the work that I do, I can bring them some value, or at least I'm available to provide value. Like if somebody hits me up and says, hey, listen, I'm doing this, what do you think? Or can you direct me? I'm looking for this. Can you help? I'm hoping that in those connections, I can provide people value. But from my perspective, curating my timeline, following people, the hope, the plan is that I'm following them because they can bring me some value, that I can bring them some value. So from a selfish perspective, they'll go for, a timeline where I don't provide anything of value. But when I look at my timeline, I'm hoping that I'm able to benefit from other people's tweets and digital footprint.
It's an interesting kind of blend because there's tension there. The expectation that your feed should actually feed you, but that at the same time you're somehow feeding it back along the same pipeline. So just for me, it's I don't know. I don't know if actually I got to start in a different space. I still believe there's zero way that you can manage 10,000 relationships. I don't think there's a way you can manage 100,000 relationships. So the number of people that are connected with you, I don't, I just, I'm going to be locked down thinking on this. I don't think there's a single way that you could ever say, yep, I got this all cracking off. Like I feel like I'm making the most of all these that I'm feeding and being fed simultaneously with all these relationships. So on one hand, we have a system, the digital system that gives the impression, if you just choose to stay there, that you're building relationships. On the other hand, it can give you the sense like it's a marketing tool, right? I mean, this is one of the major tensions for me with it is like, am I pushing out to publish just to sort of put things out there so other people can react to it, or am I looking to sort of create content that is going to fold back to me and I can sort of develop and be more innovative? And with 100, if you have 100,000 people that you are, I can't see with having 100,000 people how you could be doing much more than pushing out content. And I'm stating the obvious, maybe for some people, you're pushing out content, and in doing so, you might still have 5 or 6 people in your feed that are close connections, maybe like how you and I are rolling with the close connections. Like you and I float back and forth between, open posts within Twitter to DMs within Twitter to then maybe messaging on Insta to sending a direct a text message. So there's a richness there that suggests like you can only do that on small scale. So when I was suggesting before to be able to understand the nature of the relationships, I think it's because in this diffusionary use of Twitter and the drive to having more people connecting with your feed, that there aren't any tools that actually help you understand your relationships within Twitter. Unless you're just, I mean, you could just say, I am not friends with 75% of my feed, but I'm going to keep them. There's monetary, there's might be inspirational, there might be, criteria that they say they fit into certain boxes. I think for me, when I suggest that I would like to see that visualizer is because I get to a space with some of the people that I'm connected with where I get really upset with some of the way that they behave. I get bugged by how, I get bugged because I kind of go, well, when did you change? When did you start performing this way? And before, in the past, I would just like unfollow. Now mute, I guess, is a near cousin to that, so I don't have to get rid of them. But even within this, I want to understand my thinking. Like, what is it that's triggering me thinking that I no longer want this person to be a part of my community? Now, for me, defining my social media use as a community, that might be different for other people. But I still hold to the people that I have in my feed. I ask myself, would I want to meet them in real life? And I think I still hold that. I would want to meet these people in real life and connect and sort of broaden it beyond the digital realms. So if I'm going to go there, to be able to understand the nature of the relationship in a way that makes sense, like I wish I had the tools to see that. Because there's people that, like, I've also erased my whole following list. I went through a phase there. I'm just like, we're going to burn it to the ground and start over. What's funny is I don't know if necessarily I've learned how to make better relationships through my use of Twitter. I think that I've made myself sort of strangely spectacular, as in this guy could just create another spectacle, drop everything and start over again. Like, I think like there's some of that still a part of some of the people that follow me. Like, well, in the past, he's just kind of walked away and disappeared. He's erased everything. And that could happen again. I don't know. I think that's everyone has that choice to be able to just burn it down and start over if they want. But I think before that, if I were to get to that space, and I wish I had considered this, is to, first off, if I can't go through, if I don't have the time to go through line by line the people that I'm following right now are connected to, then for me, I'm probably following too many people. Second, if I'm not prepared to do that in order to understand why I would walk away from someone, then I'm not really humanizing my digital experience. Like, I'm not taking the time to say that I'm actually building a relationship. And the only reason that hits me is because I'm not selling anything. So I don't have an ulterior motive here other than to connect with people. Quite honestly, I'm not any of the pieces that I would ever write, which is like the stuff that I do as a side hustle beside the podcasting. I don't have a monetizing future in it. I'm not looking to sort of do the bait and switch with, a small scale innovative item that I'm going to bloom out with, a paywall afterwards. I don't have that plan. I just come to realize I really am just looking to build better and deeper connection with people with no expectation of having to sell them something, nor do I want to buy something from them. So for me, it'd be really valuable to be able to have some digital reminders, because I will accept within all of this is that I am not able to mentally track all the relationships that I'm building in cyberspace. I'm not capable of doing it. And in doing so, I'm not capable of measuring the quality of the relationships that I do have, because there's still too many for me to, do it without some sort of technology. And when I think about that, I'm like, is this technology actually serving these relational needs in a way that's as good as it could be. So, man, that was too much. That was too long. What are you thinking,
It's
dude?
very interesting.
Save me.
Oh, I got nothing to save you. I can just tell you that it's interesting. It's cool stuff to think about. I think I think that it's nice that our brains can start playing with this stuff a little bit more because we have the time to do so. And that's the gift for me. That's the gift of not having to go to work for 2 months, is that my brain gets to process things, right, with respect to school and outside of school. It gets to do both. And I'm looking forward to that. I've had a bit of a rocky start to the summer. So I'm not in the mode yet, but hopefully sooner rather than later I'll get there, and I can start making the best use of my time outside of work. But well, we were talking a little bit before we started about like I had recorded my experience this school year at a new school, right? I had done little vlogs throughout the school year, and I was really happy to put one together on the last day. I wanted to actually do it at the beginning of the last week, but it didn't feel right. And it didn't feel right because on the last day of school, my school had a year-end mass where we all got together at the church and we had a celebration. And my class was one of the 3 classes responsible for putting it together. So I literally did not feel any relief of this school year until lunchtime on Friday. That's when I felt like, okay, I can turn down the volume now, and I can really start to shut things down. And I feel like I feel a little ripped off that I had to hold on right till that point. And I don't mean that I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean like okay, so for a lot of people, they were gradually turning the volume down. They're gradually walking away from the school year. There was no gradual. I got to that point and I literally took the knob and just twisted it. And for me, there's an emotional toll with having to do that. And it's exhausting. So literally, like, I could feel it during the mass. So with every reading, with every portion of the mass where a student would have to do something, and that me and the 2 other teachers had to monitor the students doing it and making sure the students were doing what they're supposed to be doing throughout this church experience, I could feel less responsibility on my shoulders as it was happening. And then when it was over and I was walking my kids out of the church and back to class for lunch, I was just like, I was literally just like, I went to mass with like 100% in me, and I was leaving with like 80% gone and just 20 left in the tank. And then the day was over and I went home. So here I am sitting to you, talking to you 2 days after. And I still, as you know, the reason why we're talking 2 days after is because we couldn't talk yesterday because I had a family situation, which then is like I think it was, I haven't even started to feel like school's over and I can just relax. I haven't felt that yet. And maybe other people don't feel that. I don't know. All I know is there's something about that feeling, that switch. And as soon as you switch, it's a different feeling. I'm not there yet. I've not switched over. And it's irritating me. It's bugging me because I feel like this is when you switch over. So I'm prolonging the switch over. And I don't want to. I want to soak up every minute of my time, my free time. What I mean by that is the time I don't have to physically go to work. I can do it all from here. Last night, my wife put the kids to bed, and she came downstairs, and she came into the family room, and I was on the laptop, and I was working on that PD that I'm doing for the summer with my association. And she goes, "Are you working?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she kind of just like, she took a breath, like, "Oh, you're working." I'm like, "Yeah, well, it's got to get done." And she's like, she goes, "I'm not working." And she just gave me this look, like that, the look that I'm aiming for. I'm chasing the switch. You know, she switched. She's in that mode. And I'm like, I won't be in that mode until a couple of things happen. And I made the comment, like, they better happen in the next 2 weeks, because I don't know what I'm gonna do if they don't. So like, we have to buy a new car. I have to get this presentation done. And it's like, it weighs heavy on you when you have real life stuff. Like, the car is a real life thing. For anybody who's had to go buy a car, for anybody who's been forced to have to buy a car, it's not pretty. If if you're aware of your financial situation, and like, I could go get a car on Tuesday, but I could pay more than what it's worth. I can go into debt for 5 years. Like, I could do those things easily, right? So some people will be thinking, what's the big deal? You just go to a dealership, you tell them what you want, they crunch the numbers, you agree, and you walk away with your car, and you pay them for the next 5 years. I don't want to do that. So I got to put a little bit more time into where I'm getting the car, how much I'm paying for the car, negotiate with my wife, things like that. That's taking up my space, and I feel a little bit bothered that I have to deal with that. But when I get my head out of my rear end, I realize this is the best time to be doing that, because I don't have to go to work every day. I don't have to wake up and be like, oh geez, how am I going to get to work? Or, oh geez, how am I supposed to buy a car if I'm at work 5 days a week, right? So in that regard, I'm really lucky that the situation I'm in is happening to me right now. Very lucky. So I'm going to end there. I'm going to end with, the switch hasn't been flipped yet, but in the middle of what is kind of chaos in my head, I'm feeling okay, because it could be 100 times worse.
I always like that little plug on the end. It could be worse.
Could be worse. What? It could be. It could be worse.
I like it. I like it. Mostly because it's so alien to my thinking. I don't.
That it could be worse.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever said that. I don't know if I've ever said
so
that.
You never consider the situation you're in, and that it could be worse than what you're currently experiencing?
No.
Or, like, I would love to hear, so how do you do it? Let's say you're in the same situation as me. You take your car into the shop, and they're like, we're not giving it back to you.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it could be, I just got into a huge accident. My family's in the hospital, and my car's gone. So I don't have a car, and the people that I love are injured, and I got to deal with all that. Whereas nobody's been injured in this situation. Nobody's in the hospital. Like, I would love to hear your perspective on that. Maybe I do that to feel better. I think I do. It gives me perspective. It helps me realize, yeah, the situation you're in sucks. Would you like to have it another way? Or would you like it to just remain how it is? I don't know. I'd like to hear your perspective.
It's just funny. It's one of those things that I notice in the problem-solving toolkits of others. It's that particular phrase. Things could be worse. It could be worse. And I get that on one hand. On one level of that, it is kind of just about planning and plotting. Like, you're sort of you're saying that without some steps right now, without doing something intentional, this unmanaged thing will become, you could almost put whatever you, I mean, worse is one way, more broken, more irritating. Like if I don't take action, what's funny is that I don't imagine worst case scenarios when I'm inside of a worst case scenario. Maybe that's how I differentiate. I imagine possibilities often when I'm away from problem solving. So when I'm actually in the moment, it's like I've done some visualization, mental training, some calisthenics to actually deal with that moment. And even when somebody else goes through it, I spend time thinking about while they're going through it. I'm like, well, I'm gonna try and benefit from their problem and make decisions along with them. So think to myself, I would do this, I would do this, I would do this, I would do this. But I don't, when I'm in, I'll use this word. It might not be the word you're thinking, but when I'm in crisis, I am nowhere other than in crisis, nowhere. And just staying very close to what's happening in front of me. And everything within me, I'm not saying like this isn't robotic. Everything in me, the human side is trying to push me away from that to try and sort of make some of the connections that you're doing. But I've worked to stay right there with the actual problem. If I think about you going through this, there's from where I'm sort of analyzing it, where I'm sort of like, I have to be able to look at the game tape. For me, there's nothing about it that would rattle me. And it's not, I'm not dismissing your process, but there's nothing about this particular situation that would rattle me. And I can talk through that if you want. I mean, it's just, and it's not that I don't get the emotionality and the investment and the complications, but those all become part of dealing with the crisis, not the next step of the crisis. So maybe part of where I go is that the things that you're suggesting are entirely right now a part of what I'm dealing with. And in doing that, if the next thing happens where I can't get my kids to school or somebody else needs the vehicle, or if that happens, me trying to sort of project into it while I'm in the middle of it doesn't help me at all. Maybe that's where I've learned. Like, it does not help me actually work through the problem, because I feel as if with my brain being triggered, I don't have access to anything that would actually make me remember what I just thought through would be a way out of it. So just opportunizing when I'm in the middle of it. So for example, if I wake up in the morning, and my car was dead and the car wouldn't work, at some point, if you're to ask me what's the biggest end game, it would be me taking an unpaid day. And I've accepted that. I can accept that as collateral to me not having a vehicle that day. What I do between those two possibilities is entirely based on time, accessible resources, family management, work management. But I realize there's a finite amount of space and time with me to sort of deal with an idealized outcome of getting to work on time, getting the kids. So I already know within this, I'm going to have to compromise. Like, there's going to have to be something that will not work in this plan. Because to have a plan to get to work, we've talked about this, the emergency plan in the morning is a very delicate balance of yeses and nos, accomplishments and not accomplishments. And anything can really turn it on a dime. And we talked about, just hearing that cough. Oh, is that just a clearing the throat? Does it sound croupy? So right away, it's like, what plan have we just shifted into? Not what future is coming down the pipe. Because the truth within that is that if I hear a croupy cough in the morning, 3 years ago, that very much so did result in me not going to work. I have that as a template. I'm not going to work today. So everything that I can do within that time to sort of deal with that has to all be right in front of me. I think that part of this, it's probably one part personality, but it's also, I'll say, quite honestly, some of the mindsets that I was forced to exist in when I was running restaurants. Because even if I did have personal goals that I was hoping to achieve in the day or within a shift, it was entirely connected with this bigger sort of beast of a thing, which is the restaurant opening that day. So I couldn't be anything other than sort of like a sentient cog within the system. I had to contribute to the whole. So there was no space of me sort of necessarily thinking about a bad outcome. There was no bad outcome that we could allow ourselves to believe would happen that we couldn't deal with. Sometimes this can be some blindness. Sometimes this can be just it can allow you to cool down faster. Sometimes you actually made big mistakes because you didn't have the resources at the time. You just didn't have access to anything that would help you, but you believed you could. For me, again, in your situation, there's nothing about that I would say to myself, I couldn't make a, I can't sort of, that I can't deal with or sort of work through. Sometimes within that frame, and it's a funny little bit of mindset, where I go and where I become problematic, where it becomes problematic for me is that I can deal exactly with what's in front of me. Part of that lockdown thinking and trying to make something happen, the cost for me is that I stop expressing my needs within it, like my personal needs. So people sort of understand that I might be in crisis. And what I've started to try and find a way to do is how do I express that this problem, this thing that I'm working with right now, I might need help, and not feel like by asking for help that someone would think less of me. And that kind of comes down a modeled sort of way of being in the world, that somehow me believing that people think I've got myself under control. So when something like this happens, I'm still going to go into fix it mode, but I've tried to figure out how do I, at that same time where I feel like I'm effectively dealing with the problem in front of me, how do I also speak to the important people around me in a way that they still see that I'm working on it, but that I'm open to their support. And I realize it's not the person who's observing me. This isn't their issue. This is how I express my stress. So how do I include in my process these reach outs to resources that I've made them believe that I'm okay? So the last time my car went on the fritz, and we had advance notice, we had a holiday weekend to deal with. Now, great holiday weekend to deal with because you have time, but what you don't have is access to resources because there was no mechanic. I couldn't get a mechanic appointment to get my car fixed until the Monday morning. So it was one of those holidays where some people got Mondays off, this guy, but not everybody had. So the mechanics were open, but there was no assurance that they were going to be able to fix the car in time for Tuesday morning, which is this routine we're talking about. So I realized what I haven't done. Here's what happened was I realized in that moment of mini crisis, let's say, I realized I hadn't been keeping connected with resources that could help me in the general sense. So reaching out to a friend to ask them, would I be able to commute with you? It didn't occur to me at first because I had pushed it so far out. And the reason I pushed it out is that I'd actually lost some of the social connection with this individual. And that took some rebuilding, and it did come down to the person said, yeah, that's fine. Like, we can work this one out. It ended up that the vehicle was drivable. I had to take it back on the Tuesday again, but it was drivable. So I'm realizing that a really oversimplified way to kind of wrap this is that the things that I'm keeping in the man box aren't always like, I need to find a way to sort of express outside that, especially when I'm in a mode, stress, dealing with something, crisis, dealing with something, and realizing that in order for me to actually be effective, I have to be able to reach out of it and say, here's this. I've gotten less comfortable with people noticing that I don't have it all together. Like, I don't want people noticing that anymore. I want to start being able to tell them I don't have it all together. And I haven't figured out a really great way to do that. Because I lock it down. I lock it down so quick and just go into fix it mode.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear different perspectives.
It's a summer school therapy session.
This is our first episode of summer school.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, yeah, no time to process the end of school. Just jump right into summer school.
Yeah. That's okay. That's okay.
Hey, are you going away this summer?
I am, dude. We've got a couple.
Did you go away last summer too?
No, we were all
kind of.
Okay. I think we're local. Excuse me. We were local last year. It's funny. I was trying to remember that too. It's like, what did we do last summer? I don't think we did. See, last summer too was a little bit of a plot and planning summer because Karen was transitioning to administration. So I think we thought to ourselves, let's stay close. Let's just stay and do family stuff. Her schedule shifted a little bit. So she has an early start school. And because, you're admin, you're there, definitely part of that. Like, she's going in next week. She's got stuff to take care of. She now has breathing space to be able to take care of some of that paperwork that's just kind of got stacked up. So it narrows the margins a little bit. So,
did she have a good first year in admin?
Yes. Very good year.
And so she's good with the move.
Yep.
Like she's feeling good about having jumped from teacher to admin.
Mm-hmm. Here's the human. Here's the human. The observations from husband, life partner, colleague, support system. You can be good and still have not good stuff happen. So there were a lot of things that being a part of that sphere in education that you're learning as it's coming at you. And you realize really quickly that team connect. Well, if we go back to what I was saying, that crisis, how you deal in crisis, is that there really isn't the time. Not that I could observe, there wasn't the time to sort of project too far into the future or project kind of like retrace too far into the past. Because, one of the EDU terms is that when you're in that de-escalation mode, tracking and mapping, you really do have to, like, in order to really see what's going on in front of you and not get too far away from what's being presented, whether it's, a conversation with a teacher or it's dealing with a student that is just here and they got to get down to here even before you can start to talk about helping them or dealing with community events. You got to stay so tight in the eye of the issue that, me observing the outside, that is the why, that's the driver of why, part of the driver of the why of her going in next week is then going in and trying to close up some of those things when the issue is no longer specifically there. You've gotten to the periphery of the issue and you can kind of get some of the support systems done, AKA the paperwork. So it takes up a lot of processing time. She rocked it. She's tapped into spaces of her, just her, through this role, I think. Understanding at a deeper level and being able to sort of connect to what she just gets naturally about working with people, building community, leading people. Some of the pieces that I think were kind of maxing out when she was in the classroom. It's sort of like she kind of hit the edge of the bubble, and that bubble, she wasn't sort of tripped up by the bubble. I think she transitioned just in time to sort of see that there's another world kind of just on the outside of that. And it's, I'm excited for her. I think she's been dealing with some big stuff. She's delivered on some really interesting moments and stuff that just like some of the stuff that when you talk about EDU and you have two educators in the family, I mean, if you have someone that's teaching, art and someone that's teaching phys ed, it's always interesting to see where those two spaces kind of overlap. And we had, some conversations like that where our philosophies of EDU, philosophies of leadership, and seeing it from two different perspectives, it was cool to get that conversation reinvigorated a little bit. But yeah, she's rocking it.
In your board, what's the timeline in terms of her getting her own school? Like, I know she just finished her first year as vice principal.
Mm-hmm.
Is your board similar to mine, where it's many years before a high school vice principal becomes a principal?
Well, I guess I don't think there's necessarily a standard. I'm imagining like in many jobs, you could be, I guess you could be tapped, as in someone could say, you know what, have you considered? And then that kind of plants a seed. And then, because there's different courses to take if you are going to go from vice principal to principal. So there's another area of qualification that you would take. So that suggests to me an intention. So if you were to, because you kind of have the luxury, I guess, if you take the principal's courses, like you can kind of sit on that and you can keep teaching. And I've heard people say, yeah, it was the best professional development I've ever taken, but I have no plan on shifting into administration. I just really appreciate that I got that system perspective. Like I got bigger pieces to pay attention to now. I think though, once you transition to vice principal, because it's not a thing necessarily that you sort of go to vice principal and then you're shifting back to the classroom again. So I kind of think to myself, if you are in an administrative position, you are to become a VP is also accepting the possibility that you would become a principal, but it takes some intention. Like it takes the courses, and then you're also building the relationships and getting the mentorship to be able to do that. And there is no clear timeline. My hope is two things would happen in order to create a timeline. You yourself would recognize that you would like to lead a whole school. So you start taking the steps to develop yourself, develop your craft, your leadership tools, making the connections, taking the courses. And my hope is that as you did that and you open yourself up to other experiences, like you just kind of declare that you're working on this thing, that someone that's in a mentorship role or someone in another leadership role would say, hey, you know what, like they would offer some direction so that you could feel like you were building towards something. But there's nothing specific.
So are you saying that she could be a vice principal for the rest of her career if she chooses to be?
Yep.
Okay.
And by the numbers, that is a reality, right? Because if you're thinking if you consider the number of teachers in leadership positions, and then the number of positions of responsibility, which is your department head, you can have a whole lot more people that are kind of developing their leadership craft, but will never actually get to lead a department. So building off that, you then have this body of individuals that have, now you don't have to be a department head in order to become a vice principal. One of the things I would say is you are building your sort of community understand by being a department head. It's more likely you're going to be in system level discussions that would benefit you as you move to a vice principal's position. But when you hit vice principal, there's a reduced number of individuals that are now within that school leadership level. And from that tier, that's where they're drawing their principal. So it becomes even more reduced numbers. So there's always going to be more vice principals than principals. And there's always going to be more available vice principals to move to principal than they'll ever need. And you can stay. You can stay. I think that's where I go back to, it becomes the, VP's intention. If you're developing your craft in a way that you're declaring to the system and your mentors that I would like to also grow into a full-on principal's role, that between what you're doing and what people are seeing, that there's some harmony there. So you can have some pretty open conversations about what you need to do, what you need to experience, who you need to connect with. I'm observing this not from inside anything, the process that my spouse has gone through, but more from working in spaces where I've observed different individuals sort of move through the system. That's informing this so much more. Like I don't have any, I couldn't point you to a board document that sort of says, yeah, here's how it kind of talks about this. I don't know if there's many conversations about this. Like, sorry, I can't even say that. I just know from my point of view, I've met individuals that are like, yeah, I'm happy. I like doing the work of a vice principal. I don't think I really want to run a whole school. I want to stay in this spot.
Very cool.
It's a thing, eh?
Well, it is a thing. And I like that you're talking about there's no memo or statement on the thing. Like now I'm thinking about my school board, and I don't think there's a memo. I don't think there's anything written that explains to you this process. I think it's all word of mouth, it's all tradition, it's all cultural, and so you kind of put all those pieces together and you come up with the idea of how it operates within your system. If there's nothing, like, yeah, I'm just thinking, I don't think there's a document that I can look at that tells me in a formulaic way what I might want to do to consider becoming an administrator in my system. But if I talk to senior administration or a principal, which I have, they'll tell you, well, you might want to consider these pieces, and have you considered this and have you considered that, because those bode well for your attempt to move into administration. So, but it's interesting, nothing's written down, because I don't think there is. I think it's hard. I think when you have a checklist, which there is kind of a checklist, like you have to take certain courses, right? And if you look at the postings, they'll tell you what's required and then what's a desirable asset to have. And it's funny because the required stuff is this big, and then the desirable stuff is 3 times as long, because they're like, we recognize not everybody's going to have a master's degree. Not everybody will have gone through our 3-part leadership courses within the system. And, maybe not everybody has taught in elementary all 3 divisions. But they're like, so it'd be, if we said all these things are required, our pool of applicants would be tiny. But if we have these, 6 requirements, but then 18 desirable assets, then we can have different people come to the table and meet with us about this. I think that whole culture is very interesting to me.
I get the sense there's a couple things that, well, one, our school board does have the equivalent of coffee talks. Hey, I heard you're interested in becoming a principal, kind of thing. So they'll have after school sessions where they talk about that leadership path. So those are available, and they happen, regularly, and you can sign up and you can go and hang out. It's always an interesting, I imagine one of those meetings can be kind of fascinating, because you're going to an all call, a cattle call, and as an offering, the board gets a peek at who, like, it's not cold information. The fact that this event happens means that you're going to get noticed. And there's 2 noticings that happen there. I think one, the system gets a peek at, because it's a cattle call and it's the only opportunity to do it in a formal way, the system gets a peek at some of the dreamers. So people that are sort of thinking about this next shift. The second part, and I don't know any lesser, I don't know if it's more powerful, is the dreamers get to look at the dreamers. So I'm imagining this moment where 2 people from the same school that have a certain kind of interaction within the school both show up at this meeting, and they look at each other and it's like, Really? That's interesting. So that's the first part. The second part that you made me think about is the idea, if you're to, I get that you can sort of say we need some basic leadership criteria and experiences in order for you to really like manage a school. Like there are some I won't say inarguable courses, but I think there's some spaces that you have to have in the least some learning in, and that can be some more technical and facility understanding, as in, how to use the new technologies that you're going to be using as a principal, or understanding all the documentation and organizing the different documents you're going to be using now as a principal. And then there's, a whole other probably folio of the visioning tools, as in how do you actually bring an idea through planning to delivering. So there are some sort of technical pieces. But as far as having that cohesive document that says, here's the checklist, it makes me think about genetic pools, where if the genes are all similar, then that means one hostile event or a pathogen can take out a lot of your support structure. Whereas if you are looking at building leadership opportunities with equity and diversity in mind, so this isn't just on the this isn't just looking at the whole person from whole person perspective, as far as, let's say, race, culture, orientation, those spaces. It actually draw into experience. So is there a mindful approach to bringing in the artists that are also want to be leaders, to bring in the tech creators and also to be leaders, bringing in the social workers and the social connectors as leaders, so that, a school, what happens at a school may look one way because you have sort of a specific type of leadership, but you have kind of like a really mixed bag of leaders within a group. And then throughout the school system, you have mixed bags of leaders throughout the system, all as highly qualified as you need, as diverse as you need. But you're then sort of building, I think, a more robust kind of, I'm also using a biological kind of point of reference, but you have a stronger, more robust system by having those diverse type leaders. And I think that two things are happening within my board: the recognition from system level that these leaders are valuable and viable, these types of leaders. And second, a slow reveal of individuals who are interested in leadership positions, but are thinking to themselves, I've never really revealed my whole self, and I'd like to, and I think I can in this leadership position. I feel a little bit safer to do this now. I feel a little bit more confident to do this now. To oversimplify it is that if the norm is the sort of, middle-aged, cisgendered something, what if you're not a part of that sort of picture? What if you have other qualities that you would also like to rock in your leadership role? Do you feel safe to do it? And I think there's a slow, positive discussion happening between those two pillars within leadership. So the system recognizing that we need to be mindful of our inclusivity, and you have a cohort of leaders that are coming up that are saying, I want to push back a little bit and actually bring my whole self to the classroom. Again, I get the luxury of observing this from outside the loop when I see different things, interactions happen in the board. But I think those are two really interesting tensions happening.
It certainly is interesting when you show up for like what you guys do, the coffee chat thing, and you see people there. Mm-hmm. That's interesting, where you see people there that you had no idea mm-hmm. had any kind of interest in this, and they had no idea you did. that happened here in a funny way a couple of years ago, and it wasn't a coffee chat thing. It was we had a new director, and the director said, okay, on this Wednesday from this time to this time, anybody who's interested in leadership should come to this session. And I believe that she had also, the way she had shared her idea with administration, it appeared as though administrators were kindly invited to invite one or two people from their schools to come. So it was also like, if you look at the layers here, you got a message to this entire system saying on Wednesday, whatever date, from 4:30 to 6, please come to the board office and meet in the parish hall if you are interested in system level leadership in our board. So there's the one layer. Now, I didn't hear about the next layer until I got to the thing and I saw people there and I said, whoa, I didn't know you were interested. And then the response, oh, my principal came to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, I really think this might be something for you. I'm inviting you to attend. So I get to this thing and I see people and they're seeing me and we're looking at each other with, oh, I didn't know you were interested and I didn't know you were interested. And we're talking like there were lots of young people there too. It wasn't just the middle-aged cisgender. It was like young females, young, and sorry to attach a gender. I shouldn't. I won't. But there was young people. There were older people. There were newer people to the profession. There were more veteran people to the profession. So it was a mixed bag. And then, you're like, hey, I didn't know you were interested. Well, my principal came to me and said, there's an opportunity and I should check it out. So there's the tap on the shoulder, right? And then you wonder, why wasn't I tapped on the shoulder? And you could easily go nuts to start thinking about that. But then you have to look at the administrators. So my friends who were tapped on the shoulder, they have administrators that are more open, more inviting, more willing to say to a group of people, hey, I think you'd be a good leader in our system. You should come check this out. Whereas, other administrators probably didn't even tell their teachers this, like from, because it was sent out to the system, they probably didn't say a word more than that. But I think they were encouraged to attend as well. So you just look at the situation, you look at who's there, who's not there. I know always for the last year and a half, a big shock to me has been when teachers apply to the vice principal pool, and it slowly gets out who applied. And then, then people start to talk, good or bad, that's the way it is. Or that's like, the information I'm receiving is, I start getting text messages, hey, did you know that so-and-so applied? I'm like, no, that's good. Or whatever it might be, Sometimes there's, hey, did you hear about this person? I'm like, that person is interested in leadership? And it's all based on your experience with that particular person.
Yep.
Anyway, so that whole thing is interesting, and it's all the unwritten rules, and you could do everything that you think is on a checklist and not get an interview.
Yep.
Or get an interview and be told that this time around you're not successful, and then you have to figure out, then there's that dance afterwards. There's the debrief, and whether you feel the debrief is authentic, not authentic, like it can be a wacky road if you decide to travel down it.
Yeah, I think there's also just the thing that you're tapping into is that you can do, man, it's gotta be tough if you're the type of person that looks at qualifications as a ladder within education, and the expectation that because you get a qual in something, and I mean, this goes within even our teachables in secondary, right? That you're going to be able to do that for the rest of your career. Like if you look at it entirely cause and effect, there was something pretty clear when I was running restaurants. The better I did, there was direct leverage to me being able to do better again. I could leverage pay. I could leverage position. I could then move on and kind of open my own restaurant if I would. Like, there was very clear stepping stones to whatever I perceived to be the successful path. And the one thing that I've really I've come to accept is that's not what happens in EDU. It's not like that. And if it is, it's kind of it's a little bit more happenstance, as in, you increase the likelihood that you can sort of improve your odds at different and more diverse portfolios by doing more different and diverse things. But there isn't a specific thing where you can say, yeah, I'm gonna leverage my own change within EDU. So much is dependent on the relationships and people kind of noticing and talking to you about something. Your capacity to say, yes, I'm going to give this thing a try, your willingness to sort of take some risk and stuff like that. It's a very it's tenuous. Like it's not straightforward, and it's not clear. And
It's
what makes that
it's also nuanced, right? Like
yes,
there are qualifications you have to have in order
yes,
to proceed, but just because you have the qualifications doesn't mean anything. And I'm sorry I cut you off, but there have been times, so I've been doing this for 17 years, and there's been ups and downs, ebbs and flows. There's been where I hit a high note and my administrator will say to me, have you considered going into leadership?
mm-hmm.
Then there's the low note where you're with an administrator that says, wow, like you couldn't lead yourself out of like a room with all the lights on kind of thing. I've
Mm-hmm.
had that. I've seen it in my 17 years. Here and there, I've seen people say, go for it. Now's the time. Then I've seen other times where they're like, you in leadership? No way. I could not support you. And it's exhausting. It was exhausting for me in both of those realms, right? Because you get this high uptake and it's like, you should get into it now because I can support you and you're doing the right things. And you feel that and you're like, well, am I doing this or not? And then in the low times, you're told, wow, you're really not a good leader and I'm not going to support you. Then you have to deal with, oh, geez, like that never feels good.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, eh? It's like you're on a surfboard and you're surfing and you could fall off with the next wave, or you could like rip right through it and be awesome. You just don't know what the sea's going to bring. And that's just it. Like, it's so, now that I look back on it, it's very interesting to me, the ups and the downs, and what I wanted, what I didn't want, what I thought I wanted, like, it's just, there's so many layers. You're right, it's not as simple as, like, other people, I know people who have jobs where, just like you said, you get the qualifications, you have the seniority, the position's yours. And if you don't get it, then there could be legal ramifications. But in EDU, it's not like that. In EDU, you get all the qualifications you want, but there's still like a human component. There's still like a nuanced interaction with people, and reputation plays a role, and other things play a role. Whereas in some jobs, you have the seniority and the qualifications, and that's your position. It's yours.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're a jerk, whether you've done anything outside of the qualifications that you must have, none of those things matter. None of those things matter because it's such a black and white system for opportunity and position. Whereas I feel like teaching's not like, in the teaching world, it's not like that. I've seen some people become administrators that I've thought, I wouldn't follow that person no matter what you paid me. And then I've seen some people be told no, thinking, holy cow, I would do anything for that person, right?
Yeah.
Based on my relationship with them and knowing who they are and how they operate. So it's crazy stuff. Crazy it can be. But I think the more you do, the more connections you make, the more value you bring to your school system. I definitely think it's a step in the right direction. I mean, in my mind, you want to become an administrator, you do a great job in your classroom of teaching your kids and leading your kids. You take it one step further and you do a little bit in the school to show that you're a leader and that you can support people and you can align yourself with the direction that your system's moving in. And then you take it outside the school and you try to do stuff within the system, even provincially if you can, and you get those experiences and you get those perspectives, and you do good things there, right? And people talk about you and the good work that you've done, the good work you continue to do, and I think those things help. I don't see how they couldn't help, but it's funny because I've seen people enter into administration from a teacher's perspective where either I don't know their portfolio, I don't know what they've done, but I can tell you that from what I've seen, I've not seen or heard of them moving in those directions. And then that just tells me, well, you just never know. Like, you just never know.
Yeah.
Everybody's on their path, and you just do what you can on your path. And who knows what they're looking for, what they want in a leader, because that changes as well. I remember back in the day, early in my career, it was more clear cut. Now it's not as clear cut. And I think it's because of things like innovation, social media, the world we now live in, where things, the cookie cutters are being put aside. There's, cookie cutting it's hard to use cookie cutters now because the world is so different. Things are changing so fast.
That's an interesting sort of transitional piece within this, is that you now have, I'm curious how, some of our colleagues have sort of international experience, very specific international experience within EDU, and they have kind of a footprint, and digital has helped with this, right? Digital has been the major driver of this. They now have a body of experience that a small portion of educators have. They have a footprint out there where, their body of work is explicitly connected globally. And I'm wondering if the process has found a way to see those experiences and to sort of allow for that to be included in whatever the expression of interest is from the individual as part of their transformational leadership package. Like, do our school boards, and I mean, I can only speak to my own, do they have a method for teasing that out? And if they, okay, or on one level, at what point have they recognized that that's valuable experience? How do they recognize it? Second, what does it look like to tease that out and include it? Because, the layering for someone that wants to run a school has to be, how do you do the one-to-one? How do you do the one-to-class? How do you do the one-to-school? How do you do the one-to-community? And then how do you get all those varied populations to connect with each other? So it's not just from the lead person that's sitting in front of the person you're interviewing saying, cool, you've made impact singularly in all these spaces, but here's the next level. Have you actually managed to activate those spaces to interact with each other? So these larger populations, has the connection been not just back through you, but these communities are now connecting with each other. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like that's a really big leadership frame. One of those spaces to tap into would be if you are doing, your chats and your podcasts and this other sort of space of information where you're sort of willingly trying to interact. And I wonder if the process, and it's called in our board. I don't know if that's what it's called in yours, just sort of quote unquote the process. I wonder about whether or not the process has been fortified enough to include those spaces. Somebody once said in our PLN, that idea of, you go to a job interview and what you would appreciate to be able to do is to include your PLN as a valued resource that you're bringing to that school. And I think at the time I got it, I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like, you're connected beyond, you can't be connected instead of, but as long as you can prove you're connected as well as, all those other layers and in the digital spheres. I wonder if the interview process has worked out a way to honor those experiences.
I think it's up to the individual pursuing uh, the leadership. I think it's up to them to sell it.
Gotcha.
I think it's up to them to sell it to their people. Like, I'll give you an example. Okay, so I feel like I've had some success in different areas within the system, and like in big areas like, innovation, assessment and evaluation, just, the two that pop into my head right away. And I think that at the end of the day, in my system, there needs to be a connection to uh, the Catholic school leadership framework. I know there's one for non-Catholic
Yeah,
leaders as well.
yeah, we got
The
one too.
Ontario Leadership Framework.
Yeah.
I know that, from this round of interviews, I've been told that there are questions connecting to the framework. Well, I think there's some non-negotiable stuff that have to be there. Like, the schools want to know, about the work that you would do as an administrator and how it would connect to the school improvement plan, the board improvement plan, the leadership framework. I think those are like the non-negotiables. And then I think it's up to the candidate to make those connections. How is what I do digitally, how does it connect to the leadership framework, and how would it benefit a school community and the system that I work in? Right? Like, so most people will look at me and cock their head funny and just stare at me. And I'm like, well, but I'm bringing my talents and my interests to the table. How do I and what I consider my strengths, how do they connect to those things? How would these benefit my school system? How would they benefit a school community? Right? And that's one of the reasons. So when people say to me, you've got a leadership blog, but you always connect it back to the leadership framework. Why do you do that? Why don't you just talk about what you're doing and how it's making an impact? And I'm thinking, because in my opinion, my mindset needs to be connected to that framework so that I can demonstrate that what I'm doing is interesting to me, it is benefiting students, but it can also benefit a system, it can benefit a school, and that my head's wrapped around the right mindset.
Yeah.
That, Ontario leaders should have or should be aware of. Then again, they look at you funny. They cock their head, and it's like, well, you do it how you want to do it. This is how I'm doing it. So that my blog also, I feel, has some kind of relevance to leadership. Anybody can write about or podcast about what they're doing and why they feel it's valuable. And I'm not taking anything away from that. I feel like I've gone to the next level with my leadership blog to say, hey, these are the things I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. And look at this. It connects to the leadership framework.
Yeah.
What I'm doing will help my system build capacity, move in the right direction. This is how I secure accountability, right? This is how I build relationships, and this is how I'm aligned to the system in what I'm doing, even though it might not look like there's any kind of alignment to the system goals. So for me, there's been an approach that's very systematic and with non-negotiables involved. Right? Do you know how many times I've wanted to write a blog post on my leadership blog that I didn't want to connect to the leadership framework? I just wanted to put it out there as, hey, this is kind of what I'm doing. This is how it's connected to leadership. But I forced myself. I say, no, this is the place where you make those connections. So make the connection and move on and maybe revisit stuff, whatever. But you got to make that connection. You got to be aware of the Ontario framework. This is what leadership in Ontario looks like. The Catholic group is adopted it, so it's not like it's just for public elementary or high school leaders. It's for everyone. And then there's always the system goals. Like, if you're a leader you can be innovative, but how is your innovation going to make your school better in terms of student achievement, staff cohesiveness, participation within the community? For me, participation within our faith. How do you bring those things together? And maybe I'm on the wrong path 100%. I could sit in an interview and they could ask me a question about, there are huge gaps in mathematics. How do you close those gaps? Well, if I just start talking about apps and Chromebooks and the internet, and I don't do anything to bring it back to our system and the needs of our system, am I demonstrating that I'd be valuable within the context of leadership in my system? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, you know what? You want to close the gaps in mathematics? It's funny that we talk about this, because I talked about this with my vice principal, and she just said to me, she's kind of like, well, how would you answer that question? And I'd say, well, first and foremost, I need to look at the data, and I need to see in my school, where are the gaps? Or first of all, look at my school. Where are the gaps in my school? Then look at the system priorities. What does the system say about the gaps in the system, and how do they connect to my school? So I have to look at the data. I have to start making connections. Then it's time for action, in my opinion. Then it's time to find the resources. Who are the people, and what are the things that are going to help us close the gap? How are we going to work together within this school? Because it's got to be a whole school thing, or else it can't just be a grade 1 to 3 thing, unless the gap in 1 to 3 is huge in this area, and then the gap in 4 to 8 is in this area. That's a whole other thing. But you got to look at your audience. You got to look at the gaps. Now, being an innovative dude that really likes tech integration, how can I use that interest and that passion to help close those gaps based on the data, right? If there's a way, let's do it. And I can tell you, in my classroom, when we've used microbits and we've used spheros, and we've integrated that technology in and made the connections to mathematics, I can tell you anecdotally, well, probably also, from a quantitative aspect as well. If you look at report cards and look at student performance on there with respect to rubrics and stuff like that, I can show you that my students had more of an interest, were more engaged, and were more willing to learn and make connections to their learning when I integrated that stuff into our classroom. I can tell you that. Like at the end of the school year, I feel like I'm at an interview, but I'm not. But it's kind of fun to say it out loud, because I usually think it, but you never really talk about it with anybody.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, do it.
I could do all that, and somebody could still say, you know what, you've not been successful in the interview. These are the things we think you need to work on. And I'd say, okay, that's awesome. Thanks for the feedback. And then I would walk away and I would think, okay, is what they told me I need to work on gonna blow my mind and have me go in a whole direction that I'm not interested in going in? Or is it feedback that will add to who I am, what I've been doing, and I just need to tweak certain things, right? There are certain things maybe I didn't consider when I responded to a question. But that math question, it really got me going. It got me going because I'm like, well, there are certain things that must be done. Whether you consider yourself an innovative person, whether you consider yourself whether you're into tech integration, 21st century social media, some of those things don't matter. What matters is, here's the problem we have in our system.
Yeah.
How are you going to help students close that gap and achieve and learn? Right? So for my friends who are doing these wicked, crazy things that look good and are engaging and seem to get kids going, there's still some basic stuff. There's still, I was blown away by the fact that some people don't consider the resources. You need to tap people on the shoulder and bring them into the mix if they have gifts and strengths in areas where your school's showing a weakness.
Yep.
I'll just give you one more and I'm going to move on. And like I said, I don't know if any of this means anything, but to me it's huge, because to me, I think I can make those connections. A couple of years ago at my last school, after looking at the data, the EQAO data, report card marks, system priorities, we realized that at our school, spatial sense, spatial reasoning was a huge issue for our students, our student body. It was huge. And so we would sit at staff meetings and on PD days, and we would work together to establish a plan to try to close these gaps. And one of the things we did, what the principal did was she called in a numeracy support, our numeracy teacher, to come in and to sit down with us and to help us with our plan and to help us do some things that we would hope would lead our students to become better at spatial reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I was working on the 3D project at the time, and I was thinking, well, using 3D software, there's a lot of spatial reasoning there. There's a lot of spatial sense that comes into play. And so I remember saying to the teachers I work with, I'm going to do all the stuff you're doing, but I'm also going to throw in another layer. I'm going to see if I can twist this 3D technology stuff that we're doing for my project. And I'm going to see how I can help leverage that to help them with their spatial reasoning. And I slowly started to use the non-digital strategies and move them into the digital world. So my kids were already doing the digital stuff. So why not then start to deal with their spatial reasoning, their spatial sense in a way that connected to the 3D stuff? And it was awesome, because what ended up happening was, at the end of this, and I remember telling my principal this, and I was so pumped, and she was a great lady. She looked at me with a big smile on her face, and she's like, look at what you've done. Like, you met the school goal, you met your class goal, you met the system goal, and your kids are better for it. And you professionally are better for it. I would tell her that when we would have a situation where students would need to manipulate things in their mind and deal with time and space, from a mathematics perspective, I would just say to them, remember what you did when you were working with that 3D software, how you were able to take your mouse and how you're able to spin things around, reverse things, flip them upside down. I said, you can all do that with your hands. Why don't you just close your eyes and try doing that in your mind, now that you have the experience of having done it with your hands and how you spent so much time doing it? And they would kind of look at me and they'd be like, well, I'll try it. And then you could see them, like they'd start to use hand gestures, which we were told to start getting students to do. And so then you've got these grade 4 students who have their eyes closed and who are literally doing this. They're doing this, and then they're able to talk to you about what they see on their paper and how they would manipulate it without really manipulating anything, just doing it up here and learning how to do it up there and fostering that. And I remember thinking that my students that year were able to take something we were able to leverage that tech, that 21st century stuff that made them feel so good about their learning. I was able to apply it to a school goal, part of the school improvement plan, part of the board improvement plan. I was able to share that with my colleagues, which connected to the Ontario Leadership Framework in what I was doing to build capacity and collaborate with my colleagues. So to me, that's a perfect example of who I am and how I'm able to take the non-negotiables and work with them to help my students learn. I just think there are people floating out there who I don't know where they hang their hat, and I don't know where they position themselves, because I've decided to do it more in a public forum way.
Yep.
In a way where people can engage me if they want, and in a way that if I'm ever sitting in an interview, it's going to be up to me to bring to the attention of the people in front of me all this digital stuff I've done and how it connects to leadership and how it's helping me prepare myself to possibly run a school.
I think I told you I had an administrator approach me saying, hey, I came across your podcast, and asked me, with all due respect and honesty, are we allowed to talk about our practice? Are you allowed to talk about your practice? I forget which one they said, are we, but it was not there wasn't a specific poke like I'm doing it wrong or that I've said something off-putting. It was a open, reflective question like, are we allowed to do this? And from my perspective, I was kind of going from I feel like I've sort of walked the line between professional and personal in my digital spaces. I feel like I've represented my experience and my observations of the life of being a teacher in my school board. So my automatic answer is yes, I believe so. I mean, within a context. I still wonder throughout this is I want to I'm always open to both being asked questions just in general about the way that I'm making connections in some of the similar spaces that you are, but also wonder around the noticing and the sort of context within which some of the stuff that I've posted and have made available to many people, what will that look like? What should that look like if it would be a part of a leadership interview or a discussion around how I'm sort of working on board initiatives, policies, activities? And it's just, it's fascinating because I would say, there's nothing that I'm doing that anyone could be doing what I'm doing, what you're doing. We've had more than enough conversations, I think, with other people when they talk about their comfort level at sort of putting conversations out there. Something that occurred to me as we're talking about this also is what have other leadership conversations look like non-specific to pursuing, let's say, an administrative conversation? There's always a little bit of shade that seems to be thrown on the conversations about teachers looking to transition to a vice principal's role. And I mean, it's an unfortunate trope. Like, it just kind of, it pops up. And sometimes it's set up as in somehow that you're not in alignment with the spirit of education if you are considering moving into any other place other than a classroom. We've had conversations about this in the past about consultancies as well. Like, somehow the only authentic educational experience is the one that happens in the classroom. So to that end, I think there's some work that still needs to be done around the value of the work and the value of posting reflective practice about the work in a way where it becomes just a little bit more ubiquitous. Like, I don't know. I would have to have a conversation with someone that was able to include their reflective practice, if that's what we're calling it, including their posts from their digital reflective practice into that space as part of their rationale for moving into this leadership position. Would love to connect with someone that has effectively done that within public school. I think within private school, it's commodified and kind of metriced in a different way. Like, I think that does become a bit of your shingle as you're applying to places. You're talking about your digital proficiency in a way that I think gives you street credit in a way that I'm not sure how it plays out in public education. I don't know.
I feel like in public education, it might be a good add-on, and it might be something that you need to consider, but I don't think it's the bread and butter anymore. When I mean anymore, I don't even know what I'm saying. I'll give you an example. When I took the principal's course, part 2, we had to do a seminar. My seminar was like the benefit, the importance of becoming a connected leader in education. So it was that leadership 2.0. How do you leverage the media, social media? How do you leverage digital into what you do as a leader?
Mm-hmm.
And I loved every minute of it, right? Because I remember my instructor saying, "You're already there. How do you apply this to leadership?" kind of thing. And I was pumped, right? Because everybody else was talking about the Education Act, IEPs, building staff cohesiveness, all those things. Those are the bread and butter of educational leaders.
Yeah.
I was kind of talking about the fringe, right? Because that's where my interests are. Like, that's what excites me. So there is a place for it. I think the powers that be, they would like leaders who can handle that stuff, who can move in that direction, but don't think for a minute that that's going to replace the bread and butter stuff.
No,
it's not. And
it's true.
And by happenstance, I had an experience where one of the superintendents was talking to a committee that I'm on. They were talking to the subgroup that I was part of that particular day. And the superintendent was politely asking us to look at our school board's improvement plan, because our it's like a 3-year plan. And so he was kind of saying, hey, when you have a minute, can you take a look at this plan and tell me, are there parts that resonate? Are there parts that don't resonate? And he flat out said it, and big respect to him for saying this. He's like, technology's great, the internet's great, but at the end of the day, we have to demonstrate how our students are doing in numeracy, how our students are doing with reading and writing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and it was funny because I felt like he was looking at me a little bit more than he was looking at the other people, because of my kind of my reputation and my work around that stuff. You know, he's looking at me like, that stuff is great, but it doesn't mean much if it can't be used, or not helping kids improve in mathematics and
Mm-hmm.
in language literacy. And I don't disagree with him for a second. And that's the thing. That's what I call the bread and butter of leadership. What are we doing as a system or in a school to improve student achievement? I think, and I have anecdotal evidence, and lots of people have observed me participate in this and do this. I think there's an easy connection between the 21st century, the way people are living now, and how we can help improve student learning today. But if I just come in and I just talk about the new stuff and not refer to any of what I'm talking about, the bread and butter, cultural, traditional stuff in education, I
Mm-hmm.
think I will be set aside. I think most people would be. I think they'd say this person doesn't have the basics, like the foundation to build upon. Sure, all this new stuff's great, but how are you going to help students in a building become better at dealing with mathematics, at getting them to read and write efficiently? I think
It's
there's some basic stuff that everybody's going to look for. Now, you know, are you more desirable if you can do the other stuff? Like if you can manage social media and you can connect to your, like for me, my faith community and my school community, and share the good work that's happening and leverage those digital tools to show that your school is a great place to be and that people are included and that you're working to produce responsible, good people. I think that's a huge bonus. But if you can't put a plan together to help your school student achievement and connect it to the school board's vision, then I don't think they're looking for people like that.
Yeah. I mean, you got me sort of thinking about, it's in the synthesis. It's in the synthesis. So you have an understanding. So you've come through the system. You have a solid foundation of understanding of as you said, the bread and butter. You've found the time to kind of float through digital resources and spaces. And then where it becomes exciting is your ability to synthesize or synergize those two experiences, not synthesize, but synergize those two experiences, and then express it in a way that those spaces that you've drifted off to feel appreciated, because you've taken something from out there and you've something kind of randomized and made it work for your school context. And then also you have people in that bread and butter stage going, that's some next level stuff. I could move and do some of those things. I think it's in that synthesis stage, or that synergizing stage, where you can get people to where you're able to communicate that. Something that I think moving forward for me, I've started to do that more, and sometimes controlling my urge to float too far out there before I've been able to test drive some of these ideas at ground level in the school. So create, do, action something before I go looking for another thing, just to kind of another sparkly thing.
Yes, lots of sparkly things. And I think some people are really tired of that. I think superintendents might be tired of the sparkly things because there's so much of it now. It's all over the place that it's like, you got to tease it out. You got to tease it out. Lots of people are doing sparkly things with no substance. That's a huge pet peeve of mine. People are doing things and they're not making connection to the curriculum. I think as teachers in Ontario, we have a curriculum, and it should be guiding us. It, in harmony with student interests, student needs, student strengths, those two things come together, and it guides us. And I think when people are doing wicked awesome stuff that's shiny, and they're not making the connection to curriculum, I think that's a big problem. Yeah. I think and for me, again, as a Catholics teacher, we've got the curriculum, we've got what we call the graduate school expectations. And, we're always connecting those things to the student learning. Always. Because that's our main job. Again, bread and butter. And so when you have a new person to education who's going after a leadership position, and they're doing the shiny stuff, what happens to them when they're asked the question, how do you close gaps in mathematics at your school, when there's huge issues with spatial reasoning, for example? What would you do as the school leader? Well, you can talk about your coding all you want, but if you're not going to make the connection to the Catholic graduate expectations, in my case, leadership framework, and then just the bread and butter of you need to have a plan. You need to put together a plan. You need to get your staff on board, and you need to work on it. It needs to be a routine, not an event. How do you do that? What's your plan? Shiny stuff, they're gonna put their sunglasses on, and they're gonna be like, the shiny stuff's not doing anything to me. Where's the meat of this? The shiny stuff is great as a vehicle to get the kids to move in the right direction, 100%. But if it's just all you're talking about is the vehicle, it's got no gas. That's just me.
No tires.
Right? And that's just me. Hey, yeah. No tires. But what if you can put treads on it instead? Right? Like, there's the innovation. Your car's got no tires. Don't worry. I'm going to put on some snowmobile treads or some skis. We're going to find a way to get that car moving. That's exciting to me. Hey, you got no tires. I don't need tires. I've got skis, and I can go faster that way. Right? Whatever. I don't know. I've really enjoyed this. I'm glad that it floated. I like the way we started, and I like the way we're kind of ending. Thanks for letting me talk a little bit about what's been bounced around my head forever with respect to leadership, because you know what? I've not entered the arena of the interview. I've not put my name forward to go sit in front of a panel of what some people might consider intimidating and answer these questions and write out answers to questions that they've given me. I've not done that. So I know it's easy for me to sit here and talk like this, but I think at least I have something to say.
We haven't played in this space too much either. We've mentioned in bits and pieces. I had mentioned too before that I was kind of thinking and plotting and planning. So, but we didn't return to it. We didn't return to it to sort of like give it any shape. So I think it's cool. Just in the last little bit, I also think it's really cool that we've created a space that affords us, I think, a very professional discussion around leadership paths that does have fundamentals associated with it. So, our positioning within, what it looks like to move through leadership, move into leadership, and to be reflective within leadership, I love that both of us have pieces of practice that are there for other people to check out. But I think also, I have also found a way to be able to discuss these things that get to it. Like, it doesn't have to be sort of ranted and inflamed, and it doesn't have to create that partition, like somehow what you're doing in the classroom is betrayed by the decision to pursue an administrative position, if that's or consultancy for that matter. It all matters. It all matters. And where it comes back to, I think, is discussions like this, where in some ways you and I are teasing out the connections between experience, the bread and butter that you've said, and what we're imagining is the next step. Like, this is what is really cool about this space that you and I have created, right? Like, it's this is what I had hoped for, to be able to have discussions like this. And whether or not it translates to any staff room or somebody else who checks out our podcast, it remains open, and it remains an open offering to others if they wish to discuss things, in a similar fashion. So I dig that, and I'm aware of our path to developing this space so that we can talk this way, because it's 2 years in the making. 2 years in the making to sort of get to discussions around some of the topics that can easily sort of lift emotion first and not intellectual kind of pursuit. So I appreciate that, man.
No problem. Glad I could be part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's Canada Day tomorrow.
Yep.
Awesome.
Stuff starts today. We're good. I got to head out and about. I'm going into Toronto tonight for an event that I wanted to check out. So all of a sudden it feels like today's the day to get the grocery shopping done, to get the lawn mowed, to get all those bits rolling, right?
The business. Yeah.
Yeah, the business.
Yeah, me too.
Get the business going.
There's stuff that has to be done. Okay, dude. Well,
the bread and butter.
Chat.
Got to get the household bread and butter done.
Right, because when you start telling your wife about the shiny stuff,
yeah, it's
like the trip to Toronto tonight.
That's it. I know that on the list is like bread and butter's got to be done. So
you got it. Dude. Okay, well, have a good one.
You too, man. You too. Take care. I'm sure we will chat soon.
Yeah. See you later.